A life so extraordinary it reads like fiction began on March 25th of 1762 in the sweltering French colony of Saint-Dominique. Picture the heat pressing down. The air is heavy. The world is structured by power and ownership, where a child's future could be decided before he ever even spoke his first words. Into that world, young Thomas was born. No one present that day could have imagined that this boy, born into bondage, would one day command armies, challenge authority, and leave behind a legacy that would echo through literature and history alike. His path to freedom was not noble, and it was definitely not kind. His father, a disgraced nobleman, made a decision that still feels cold even centuries later. To pay for his return to France from Saint Dominique, he sold 3 of his own children and even pawned Thomas. Let that sink in for a moment. A child was treated like currency, and then in a turn that feels almost unbelievable, that same father later used his restored wealth to buy his son back. Thomas was then taken to France, not as property this time, but as someone who would be raised, educated, and introduced into a world that had once rejected him entirely. In France, he did not simply survive. He rose. He grew into a physically imposing man, standing well above average height for the time. He was well over 6 feet when the average height for a man was only 5'6". He made a decision that would define his life then. He did not accept an easy path through privilege. Instead, he enlisted as a common soldier. He refused his father's name. Through sheer skill, strength, and courage, he climbed the ranks during the chaos of the French Revolutionary Wars. He led thousands of troops. He charged into battle with a reputation that spread quickly. Soldiers respected him. Citizens admired him. He became one of the most formidable generals in France. But power does not exist in a vacuum, and boldness has a way of creating enemies. Thomas was not quiet. He did not flatter those above him. He spoke directly, sometimes sharply, and that put him on a collision course with one of the most ambitious figures in European history, none other than Napoleon Bonaparte. When others chose silence, Thomas chose honesty. In one of those infamous letters that he would send, he accused a fellow officer of cowardice in language so blunt it shocked even those used to the harsh language and realities of war. He made it clear that he would not allow his actions in battle to be misrepresented, no matter who it offended and no matter who said what. This fearless general, a man who faced battlefields without hesitation, was not undone by combat, but by captivity. Thomas Dumas, after tensions with leadership and a disastrous campaign abroad, attempted to return home. Instead, Dumas was captured and imprisoned in a foreign land. There was no glory in this part of his life. There were no victories, only confinement, illness, and time slowly taking its toll. He spent months, then years, in conditions that eroded away at his health. By the time he was finally released, the world he returned to was not the world that he had left behind. The revolution he had fought for had shifted. Power had changed hands. Napoleon had risen. The man who had once commanded armies was now weakened. He was overlooked. It was no longer politically convenient. His body never fully recovered from his imprisonment, and the strength that had once defined him began to fade. He died not long after. He left behind a young son who was only a child of 3 at the time. That child, Alexander Dumas, would grow up without the full presence of the father whose life had been so extraordinary. He would grow up in hardship, in reduced circumstances, but with a story that would never fully disappear. Years later, that son would transform fragments and pieces of his father's life into something completely new. He would write of betrayal, imprisonment, escape, and revenge. He would give the world the Count of Monte Cristo. The infamous fictional count may have captured the world's imagination, but the real story behind it carries a much deeper weight. A man rose from nothing, achieving greatness. He spoke truth to power, and he paid a price for it. His victories were real. His suffering was real, and his memory survived not through monuments, but through story. Because in the end, power can be taken. Strength can fade, but a story, once the story's told, has a way of refusing to disappear. Even the Nazis melted down a bronze statue of this man during World War II. It is gone from history forever. But his story will live on in the hearts of people like myself, and hopefully many generations to come. This is by far my most favorite book in the entire world of all the books that I've ever read. And not too long before our wedding date, my husband presented me with a random gift of an antique copy of The Count of Monte Cristo, and I cried. That is a cherished possession of mine, and I love it. I know the story. I've lived parts of the story, and I feel the story. And I think so many people have. But now we've come to the part where I want to know what you think and what you feel. After hearing this, which do you think is truly the part that shapes history more? Is it the action people take in their lives, or the stories that are told about them afterward? Do you think which part stands out more? Which part is carried on more? Drop your answers in the comments. I really do want to hear your thoughts. And if you love stories like this, make sure you follow my Facebook page, History Happens, and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss the next episode. The whole thing kicks off April 1st. Don't miss out.